Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for this Griffith University alumni webinar, where we'll be looking at the topic of handling job loss and redundancy from the perspective of the job seeker as well as the employer who is faced with having to reduce headcount. My name's Joanne Nyland, I'm the Head of Alumni Relations at Griffith University, and I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which those of us in Australia are respectively located. Pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. As we move into our 2021 alumni programming and reflect on how far we have all come in the last 12 months or so, I'm delighted that we're able to continue to build online events and webinars like this one into our plans. This format allows the opportunity for so many alumni in a range of countries to be able to access wonderful presenters like the one you'll hear from shortly. Before we do so though, I'd like to highlight for you a couple of particular items. Griffith University's Outstanding Alumni Awards recognise and acknowledge the diverse achievements of alumni across their fields of endeavour and in their communities. Nominations for the 2021 awards are now open, and you can nominate an alumnus you know, or you can even nominate yourself in one of the 4 categories. To find out more about how the Outstanding Alumni Awards work or submit a nomination, you can head to the Griffith University Alumni website, and the link will show up today in the Q&A section. Something else you might be interested in, especially if you're looking for new skills, new inspiration, or a new sense of purpose on your road to recovery, you might want to consider some further study in Griffith's innovative new range of stackable professional courses, expertly matched to the emerging economy. There are more than 100 stackable courses that you can tailor to suit your needs, and you can choose to study a standalone course, or you can stack 4 courses to obtain a graduate certificate in professional studies. And what's especially exciting is that graduated Griffith alumni receive 10% off these Griffith Professionals courses, and you can find details for that on the alumni benefits page on our website. Now, before I introduce you to our speaker, just a little bit of webinar housekeeping. If you have questions for our presenter, you can ask these at any time in the Q&A panel on your screen. If you'd like to remain anonymous when asking your question, please tick the anonymous box before posting. I also need to let you know that this session is being recorded and content will be shared at a later date. If you would like to post a question but don't want to be identifiable, then I recommend ticking the anonymous box. We do encourage discussion to continue after today's session, so please share any key learnings from today using the hashtag Griffith Alumni on your social platforms such as Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm delighted now to introduce you to our presenter today, Gordon Scott. Gordon is a fellow alumnus, having graduated from a Bachelor of Arts in Modern Asian Studies from Griffith University in 1993. And since then, he's worked in senior government and corporate roles in several countries. Gordon first developed online courses in 2016 to provide employability and job readiness training to students around the world. He provides employability training at an enterprise level for Study New South Wales, Study Perth, TAFE Queensland, SEEK Asia, and many other clients across Australasia. In 2018, Gordon's business was shortlisted for the Global QS Reimagine Education Innovation in Employability Award, and recently in 2020 has been shortlisted as a highly commended finalist for the PIE Employability International Impact Award. In 2020, Gordon Scott and Philip Winning created Job Readiness Training, pivoting their online training content to support an audience beyond the student market to the post-COVID employment market. And that's where today's webinar comes in. So now I will ask Gordon to share his screen and to unmute his microphone, and I will hand you over to Gordon.
Thank you, Jo. Ladies and gentlemen, wonderful to be here on what is a very rainy day here in Brisbane. Welcome to you all. I've just had a quick sneaky look at our poll, which is published at the moment, if you haven't accessed it yet, in the chat. And I can see that there are already people who are coming in from overseas. I understand we have quite a large audience, and it's absolutely fantastic to be with you here today to talk among the brethren of Griffith University. So I had thought I might give you a little bit of background about myself, but thank you very much to Joanne and the team at Griffith for preparing that introduction, so I'll jump straight into the topic at hand. For those of you who are in Australia, we're all very aware of the fact that the JobKeeper subsidy is due to end soon, at the end of this month. And I think that's raised a lot of concern among quite a number of people. And I see among our poll attendees that the majority of you thus far are potentially job seekers. Today, I would like to step you through a process that we've developed, which has been designed to help people to deal with job loss and redundancy. And to that end, I wanted to introduce you to a course that we've developed around this very topic. We'll have a giveaway at the end of our presentation today, which will enable you to be able to access some of this material. And I would like to possibly just create a definition around who our audience is today. I anticipate that among us we have employers who are interested in how to manage the process of cutting costs and understanding how to potentially let people go if the JobKeeper subsidy is removed. I am aware that we have a lot of existing employees who may be concerned about the impact of JobKeeper removal and concerned about their jobs. And of course, there are a number of us who are job seekers in the audience, and you may be a recent alumnus of Griffith University, still looking for work, or you may indeed be one of these people who has been affected by the pandemic and its economic impact. So we have around about, I think, 450 people who've registered today. If you haven't yet had a chance to have a look at the poll, please jump into it. It's in the Q&A. It's simply a link through to a form. Chats have been enabled, as Joe has said, and so the questions and comments will be curated and sent through to me for me really to address during the course of the webinar, but also let's see if we've got some time at the end to have a bit of a Q&A as well. My objective today is to help people understand how you can develop a plan of action and put this plan in place so that you are able to deal with job loss or redundancy perhaps faster than if you didn't have some sort of a rubric or support mechanism available to support you. To that end, we've developed job readiness training to provide practical training, online training, in a social constructivist environment, and I'll redefine that a little later in the presentation. But it's really that the business is about, at scale, helping people whose jobs have been affected by the pandemic. And so let's just take a little bit of a look at where the numbers are at the moment. In Australia, we've had a peak of just over 1 million people who've found themselves either unemployed or underemployed. And as of February, that number has started to come back a little. We're sitting at around 875,000 unemployed people in Australia at the moment. The question is, what will that number look like in a month's time or in 2 months' time? So in terms of defining our audience today, you'll see in our poll that we're asking you to determine if you're an employer, if you might be an existing employee who is worried about work, if you're a current job seeker, or you may just be somebody who's quite curious about the topic. And that curiosity may extend because you work in a employment services role, or you might be a HR provider. I'll jump through now and just take a quick look at how that poll's tracking. We've had 38 responses. The majority of you appear to be curious. Some of you are job seekers, and a couple of worried employees and employers. Do you feel that JobKeeper will have an impact upon you? 26 no, 12 yes. And as I say, I've seen quite a number of people popping up from around Australia and a few from overseas. We'll check back in on that poll in a sec. But for now, that helps me because it's helpful at the beginning of a presentation to know who's in your audience. I have this lovely choose your own adventure tag here on the slide because we've designed our presentation to really serve the needs of these 4 audience types. And so we'll see that pop up again. Let's take a look at the unemployment statistics in Australia and how they compare to some other markets. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were sitting at about 5% unemployment in Australia. And again, these statistics are seasonally adjusted and include unemployed as well as underemployed people. The definition of underemployed, simply, you haven't got enough hours, you're not working full time. And so Canada was already sitting at a reasonably high unemployment rate. The US was sitting at quite a good unemployment rate of 4.4%. Cue the impact of the pandemic, and pardon my political influence here, but an acceptance by a certain American president of the pandemic having an impact upon the economy. We saw unemployment in the US skyrocket to 14.7%. In Australia, it went up to 11.8%, and in Canada, 13%. It started to come back down again during sort of July and towards the end of last year in each of those different jurisdictions. So in July last year in Australia, we had our peak of 1.18 million unemployed people. Compare that to the United States of 16 million, quite an extraordinary difference, and Canada sitting in between. Fast forward to now, as I mentioned before, our unemployment statistics have dropped in Australia down to 875,000. In the US, they're still over 10 million. But what is fascinating is that, in fact, the unemployment payments statistic per capita in America are quite a different story to the official statistics about the number of unemployed. So I guess the question is just how good are our abilities, how good are our government's abilities to be able to record realistic unemployment stats. 18.3 million is the more likely figure in the United States. And of course, what we're worried about here in Australia is what that number is likely to look like with the end of JobKeeper. Alrighty, so I guess you can see there, by way of background, who we are, why we've developed what we've developed, and what our objective is. We're hoping to help people to reskill, to redevelop the types of job application skills and the level of confidence that they need in order to be able to gain employment once again. And as scary as the statistics are that I've presented there is some light on the horizon. We have, of course, the vaccines which are now being rolled out around the world, and we have renewed confidence with a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel with the Australian economy really starting to pick up again. And so, fingers crossed, we're not going to see another million plus people unemployed. And our hope is that we can work with as many employers and government agencies as possible to deliver some of our training to help people to redevelop confidence. So now I'd like to just play a short video. This is, I guess, probably the easiest way to define a background as to how the company's come about and what we're trying to achieve. And this is courtesy of Channel 7 News. Joe, I see you shaking your head. I've paused. Can you just give me a thumbs up if volume is coming through? No volume. All right. I apologise for that, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have to fix that. I'll move on and we'll see if we can get the volume fixed in a sec. All right. So the process of working through dealing with redundancy is something that's being copied and developed with the support of a series of careers counsellors. And so what I'd like to do is step you through some of the core elements of this particular training course, this dealing with job loss and redundancy training course here. The first is to really breathe, and we'll get into some of the detail about this shortly. We help you to gain a sense of perspective, to develop, if you like, an emergency budget that will enable you to work out how to manage your finances in that period between losing employment and finding employment again. And some of that process may involve, talking to your bank manager and understanding how to manage loan repayments, etc. Then we set about dealing with some of the practical aspects of redundancy. And we have a look at some of the definitions, the paperwork, the likely process that you'll be going through, with a focus upon your well-being. The concept then is to really help you to re-identify what you feel your purpose will be, what is your self-identity, and what are some of the strengths that you know you bring to an employer. And we help you to, in effect, redevelop your career plan moving forward. Then that plan of action is developed within the course, and then it's really up to you then to determine which direction you want to take, and we'll introduce you to a number of different direction options. I guess the very first thing to acknowledge is that being made redundant is a very emotional process. And so being able to accept that everybody goes through the same process, it is a human reaction to feel emotional about losing work. And we feel that it's important to have a series of self-reflection exercises in place within our training to be able to support people with this emotional journey. But the very first step is to acknowledge those emotions and to understand how to go through what is effectively a grieving process related to your career. I'll jump into the journey in a bit more detail shortly. Firstly, I might just ask our Griffith team if they might be able to help me determine how to get our volume operating on videos again. So if possible, maybe somebody could just shoot through a text to me. Meanwhile, I'll move on to this process of dealing with emotion. The very first thing that we always say to individuals who have been made redundant or have lost their work is that redundancy in itself, as defined in Australian law, is about the position. It's not about the individual. And so if you have lost your job due to redundancy, it's important to acknowledge that it's the position itself that has been removed. You still have a huge amount of self-worth and an amazing amount to be able to give to your future employer. Now, I say this with some experience. I have been made redundant myself, and I do understand what that process is like. So the next step that we'll undertake as part of our training is to deliver you with a redundancy budget spreadsheet and help you to work your way through understanding what your costs are moving forward after you may have received some form of redundancy payout, or as and when your last paycheck is likely to hit your bank account. We also provide you with a great deal of support, a great number of support options that are available, particularly in the Australian market, to help people to deal with a lot of the emotional side to redundancy. And at this point, I want to introduce a concept of how social constructivist learning can be of benefit to you. What I mean by social constructivist learning is we have an opportunity for a number of different people who are undertaking training at the same time to come together into a series of Facebook platforms that we've created. So these Facebook groups are designed to support you to really share your experiences with other people who are at that same stage in the process. And we know that there are a number of people who learn best in a group setting. And so to be able to deliver to you a rubric and a forum to be able to communicate positively with others going through this same process has been proven to be extremely effective. So let's see if we can play a video now about step 2 in the dealing with redundancy process. Redundancy in Australia is well regulated. In this lesson, we're going to step through some of the most common practical aspects associated with redundancy, such as your entitlements, which types of employee redundancy can apply to, managing tax and superannuation, what is the Small Business Fair Dismissal Code, and we'll discuss some points of access for you with health and wellbeing support services. Happily, redundancy is very well regulated and legislated in Australia, and so we help people, both individuals who have been affected by redundancy, but also employers who may be trying to understand what are the best options for releasing staff to get their head around the legalities related to redundancy. So it is the most common form of releasing people from employment contracts that are no longer required, where the position is no longer required in Australia. For those of you who are employers, I would hazard a guess that a lot of you are working in the small business field because that's where the majority of people are employed in the Australian marketplace. So in Australia, there is also a Small Business Fair Dismissal Code, which is to be followed if trying to understand how to release people from employment contracts. So after the practical aspect, it's then time to take a look at self-identity, and the training course takes people through, I guess, a rubric of understanding how to identify their core strengths as they've related to previous work that they've undertaken. So you as a potential job seeker have the ability to, I guess, rebuild your confidence and reframe what you know you're very good at. You'll help to understand what your purpose will be in this new context. And a lot of people go through a process of redundancy and do sit down and say, well, do I really want to be doing what I've been doing for the last 5, 10 or 15 years? Is this really for me? Are there other options that I might like to take? And so we've attempted to introduce a liminal framework that helps you to consider what some of those options might be based upon your renewed understanding about yourself. So your identity, your purpose, your strengths. We step you through some personality testing to understand what your values are and what kind of personality profile you have. And then the objective here is to help you to redevelop confidence and resilience to be able to move forward with taking that next step into your future career. So after we've been through that process of self-awareness and improving your knowledge about some of the options that might be up to you, it's then time really to take action and to make some decisions about your future career direction. And I'll just play this video here. Drawing up a plan of action will not only help bolster your spirits, it can also provide a roadmap to get your career back on track. In this lesson, we'll help you to shortlist the best opportunities to pursue and make a decision about which direction you want your career to now take. As we've been pointing out, you don't necessarily have to limit your career options to a similar role to the one that you just left. If you believe your skill set is outdated, or your skills lie in an area outside of work with poor long-term prospects, then consider doing some retraining. This doesn't mean you have existing skills that will be wasted, far from it. Many employers, in fact, look for breadth as well as depth of skills. However, it's essential to have the skills needed to find work in a growth industry. If you're confident you have the skills to rebuild your career, then be sure your redundancy plan lists all of the ways that you will look for a new job. Don't overlook your professional and your social contacts. We'll help you to brush up on your networking skills in this lesson. Many jobs are not advertised, but they're filled by word of mouth. So explain the situation to people you know and spread the word that you are available for work. When you think about it, how many people you know, and whether it's through your professional network or friends or family, there could be literally hundreds of opportunities to secure a new job. If your former employer offers outplacement services, make the most of what's been made available to you. Surviving redundancy is all about tapping into every possible resource. And so it won't surprise you to learn that there are elements of improving or establishing a professional LinkedIn profile that are introduced into this course, not because we have any form of alliance or partnership with LinkedIn, but because it is the #1 professional social networking platform in the world, and it's very heavily used in Australia. So it's been our experience that people who understand how to use LinkedIn to best effect are able to use it for a networking perspective and identify other potential people that they might be able to meet with and find work. In fact, there's a whole course on this concept called The Hidden Job Market. And it's a surprising statistic that sits behind just how many jobs people are able to find through an existing or expanded network without having to necessarily go through a job application at all. So I'm somewhat conscious of time and I'll press ahead, but I'll just pull up the chat box and see if we have any chats or questions that have come through. Ditha has asked a question, what are the skills that are most required to work, especially in the government? That's a really good question. And I see you've got a follow-up one there as well. Look, it brings me to the topic of soft skills and the process of applying for jobs in government is one which is very heavily driven by selection criteria and committee. And by this I mean that typically larger organisations like government organisations will have a series of criteria that they expect people to be able to address as part of their written job application, and again will be assessed on those criteria during a job interview. So the skills that are assessed tend to be in government quite a long list, and the very first one will be your formal qualifications if they're required, and they typically are for government. So I always say to recent alumni or to students that the hard skills that you've developed during the course of your studies are extremely important for the delivery of the job, but it's the soft skills which make up the depth of the selection criteria that are likely to be assessed in an interview and during the job application process. So for government, some of those soft skills are typically going to be related to communication. You'll be asked to demonstrate your verbal, your written demonstration skills. You'll be asked to demonstrate your negotiating skills. You'll be asked to demonstrate your team skills, your leadership skills. There are very, very common and standard soft skills which are frequently assessed in government applications. So I hope, Ditha, that is an answer for you there. And yes, we do have training material available for those skills types. Can you learn soft skills? The answer is yes, but very often that learning requires repetitive application of a rubric. For example, conflict resolution and problem solving skills can be taught to somebody, but you won't actually have them embedded in your brain until you've used that rubric over and over and over again. And so, look, I hope that's gone some way towards answering your question. We'll come back. There are a couple of anonymous questions, and I might address some of those after we've progressed a little through the presentation. I'd like to take you to perhaps the most exciting step, which is time to act. Now, I mentioned before that for many people, going through a process of redundancy gives them an opportunity to consider what career direction they would like to take. And for some people, they decide that perhaps the best thing for them would be to utilise the skills and the knowledge and the contacts that they've developed so far during the course of their career. And they've always had this burning desire to establish their own business. And so we are seeing a real rise in entrepreneurship. In fact, in Australia, I think it's a term that's overused, but let's just talk about startup business. I think that there are a lot of people that are coming out of the pandemic now and have either created some form of a consultancy business or have decided that they've got a great idea and they're looking to take that to market. I think that's great, and I think it's a worthy option for people to pursue. And I think we all know, however, that there are some fairly morbid statistics related to the longevity of developing and starting your own business. So it's very important to have a business plan in place and to understand how to pursue your options with best effect. I think the statistic is something like 90% of small businesses fail in Australia within 3 to 5 years. I don't want that to put you off. I just want to make sure that people who do decide to start their own business do so with proper support and understand the process that's involved. So of course, we've included some material about that in this training. For majority of people, however, they've decided to either apply for a job again in their existing field or look to find work in an alternative field or career path. In either case, it's important to update their job application skills. And to that end, we've introduced some of the really basic job application skills update material within this course. There are a variety of other courses which have been designed to really deep dive with you as an individual to improve your self-awareness, to improve your written job application skills, your interview skills, etc. More about that in a sec. For some people, and perhaps for some who may be fairly early on in the career life cycle, you may consider adding to your resume by undertaking either some form of a volunteer role. If you're a recent alumnus, then seeking an internship, or indeed undertaking a work trial. Now again, the Fair Work Ombudsman in Australia has legislation around a lot of the rules related to these as to whether they're paid, unpaid, and how long legally you're allowed to work for an organisation through a work trial. But I would thoroughly recommend, if you're struggling to find work, just considering how you can add to your resume and prove that you're employable by having some form of internship, volunteering, or working trial on that resume. Many people, and we've seen this not just anecdotally, but now in the statistics across Australia, have decided to go back to the books and to undertake further training. And I was delighted to hear Joe talk about the discount that's available to Griffith alumni for certain courses to help with reskilling. Indeed, we work with our other business with a lot of education providers in Australia, and domestic student enrolments have increased quite dramatically following the pandemic. I think we're seeing people taking the opportunity, having lost work, to reskill and to really try and improve their resume in that way as well. Now, I doubt there'll be many people who are on this webinar who will consider the final point, but I will list it nonetheless because it's a very valid point. For some, early retirement may also be an option. And we're seeing that there are quite a number of Australians who are deciding to focus upon their superannuation. And if they've faced redundancy later in their career, they have found it quite difficult to find work again. And we saw a lot of news articles about that towards the end of last year. My advice would be, if you want to work, find that work, but early retirement is an option that some people can take. All right, now the next question that we had was, what can we do if someone cannot really work effectively? Volume's working too well. If somebody cannot work effectively in a group setting while the job requirements require to do so, do we have to adapt or find another job? All right, well, I think I'm going to have to make some assumptions around this question. But if your question is around finding it difficult to work as part of a team, then I'd go back to my earlier comments about soft skills. Teamwork is a very necessary and oft used soft skill when recruiting people for work. And I guess it comes down to the nature of the work that you're undertaking. But I think there are a few professions really in Australia which wouldn't require you to be a part of a team of some sort. So my advice to you, Anonymous, would be to see if you can brush up on your teamwork and group skills. Jason's asked a question, based on your research and labour market knowledge, what are the growing and emerging new industries in Australia, especially in southeast Queensland? Jason, it won't surprise you to learn that the healthcare industry is one which has really seen an increase in people choosing to pursue study. I know a number of people who in fact tried to get into different nursing courses with TAFE, with Griffith, with Bond, etc., and have struggled because the ATAR requirement has gone through the roof due to the demand for people trying to gain access to that sector. There are some good statistics available on the federal government's ABS labour force page, so I'd refer you to have a look at some of the statistics there. I'd also think that there'd be a lot of commentary about jobs, in particular in southeast Queensland, through a lot of the job portals such as Seek Online. So thanks for that question. Laura, on your CV, do you recommend mentioning your last job ended in redundancy? Well, I'd recommend, Laura, that you mention all jobs that you felt have been an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you've been employable and that you've delivered results. Of course, a CV is more than just a list of positions that you've held. If you have been made redundant, my very first piece of advice to you would be to not be ashamed of that. You know, particularly in light of the pandemic and the number of people across Australia who've lost work through no fault of their own. The other point that I made earlier is that, of course, it's the position that was made redundant. You are not redundant. You have a lot of self-worth. And so your CV should capture absolutely the position that you held, but I think it should also really capture the outcomes that you have delivered. That's what an employer is going to be looking for. Is this person capable of delivering on the outcomes that we have set into the job advertisement and the position description? So thank you for that question, Laura. Absolutely, I think you should mention your last job. Kurosh, you've written a long question, and I'm going to come back and answer that one in just a sec. So thanks for sending that through. So at the end of the day, I think the core element that is required across the Australian labour force, and indeed anywhere in the world where people have lost work as a result of the pandemic, is to redevelop a sense of confidence. Finding work isn't necessarily going to be easy, nor is it necessarily going to be quick. But if you're able to develop a plan of action based upon your true and best self, your best attributes, and your knowledge about what kind of sense of purpose you have, what direction you would like to take as an individual, and you're able to develop the confidence that you need, then the only other ingredient is going to be resilience. And by that I mean that it can take some time in a competitive environment to find work. So just remember that both confidence and resilience are soft skills that can be learned. If somebody says to you, you know, you don't come from a confident family, or resilience isn't a strong point of yours, that's complete rubbish. Everybody has the ability to develop these soft skills, and they are the most necessary ingredients when it comes to finding work in a competitive work environment. So having this plan of action in place, and we're hopeful that what we've developed will be extremely useful for people, then I feel is going to be half of that journey. The rest then is about understanding that it will take time and having confidence and resilience to just keep going. If you're unsuccessful with one job application, find out why and use that why to improve your next job application. This is called learning through failure. It's failure is used in a different context. And what we mean here is if you didn't get it this time, work out how to make your next job application far more competitive. So we've got probably a few minutes left for me to keep talking. I'll come back to the choose your own adventure concept. If you're a worried employee, and let's just take another look at our audience here. So the majority of you appear to be job seekers. Let's wait for this to refresh. And if that's the case, then I think that this slide is really talking to the majority of people in our audience. If you're concerned about your work or if you have lost work, then just go through the process that we've established here and understand how you can improve your confidence. We have found that the training that we've been able to undertake with the student market has resulted in a 98% success rate, or at least a satisfaction rate. Here we are with the statistics. So 22 of you are curious, 16 of you are job seekers, and 6 of you are worried employees. All right. At the end of this webinar, regardless of where you are on that pie chart, we're giving away 50 free courses to Griffith alumni only. And I'll release a coupon code for you to be able to access the course at that stage. But our hope is that that will really help you to set you on the right path. Small number of employers here, so I'll be brief around the employer perspective. But of course, an employer in this market really has a couple of problems. The first is maintaining financial viability. And the second is understanding what to do with the end of the JobKeeper program upon us. And so, one of the options that you may be considering is to cut staff numbers. And if that's the case, then I would simply refer you to our jobreadinesstraining.com website and take a look at some of the material that we've made available there to support employers, including gaining access to course bundles to be able to support employees that you're letting go with the kind of material that we've been talking about today. There will be an ongoing offer to employers, which in fact, the team at Griffith will be able to release to you through inquiry. We've got a question here from Kurosh, which I'd like to address. I have an associate degree in business management from overseas and a Bachelor of Commerce, double majoring in finance and financial planning. English is my second language. Now, the problem is when I apply for many jobs, they need work experience in Australia, but I have 18 years experience overseas. When I apply for entry-level jobs, they believe that I'm overqualified. So, Kurosh, you're caught in a very familiar situation that there are, let me tell you, a lot of international students find themselves in. In my last job, I set up and ran an initiative called Study Brisbane, which was all about helping international students to come and choose Brisbane as their destination for study. And look, even though there are post-study working visas available for international graduates, and I imagine with your particular set of degrees there, you probably have between 2 and 3 years post-study work rights in Australia. My advice is to keep going. But my other advice would be to consider, if you haven't already, joining some of the professional networks, which will probably have student membership still available to you, and get along to those student network forums within, what are we, finance and financial planning. So you might be a member of Certified Practicing Accountants or Chartered Accountants Australia, New Zealand, or whatever it might be. By presenting yourself to a lot of those network meetings, either in person or online, you will find that you'll meet people and that you may actually be able to take advantage of some relationships that you can develop that way. Keep going with your job applications. You will find that there will be more work available in Australia as the pandemic starts to lift. And so I wish you well with that. Okay, I think we're probably close to out of time, so I'll finish up now. The coupon code that we're making available to people to be able to gain access to our Dealing with Job Loss and Redundancy course is Griffith50, all one word, Griffith50. Just hop onto our website, use the coupon code when enrolling, and you'll have access to that particular course free of charge. And we wish you well with that. If you're an employer, please touch base with the Griffith alumni team and gain access to the bundle of courses that are available. If your adventure was, as we see here, 22 of you, you're just curious, then of course you have access to the discount as well. I think that we're likely to see one more dip in the road with redundancies in Australia. And I suspect that a lot of the people that have nominated as being curious today may be somewhat concerned about their jobs moving forward. So I really encourage you to gain access to your networks and to really follow the rubric that's been outlined in the presentation today. And I hope that that's been useful to you. So now we're going to jump across to some questions. And Joe, I guess you might like to determine if there are some more questions that we want to take. What's the process here? All right, so we've got a new one here. As a manager in an organisation where staff have been cut, how do I manage expectations about what is achievable? Again, I'll have to make an assumption here, but I think you might be asking, how do you manage expectations with the workload that exists but with less staff? So from that perspective, I think there are probably quite a number of people that are sitting there really feeling your pain at the moment. We've seen quite a number of organisations conduct legally what is called a spill and fill. And a spill and fill is essentially legally removing one highly paid role through redundancy and then filling a cheaper role beneath that, which has a different work or position description associated with it, but effectively is trying to get some of those similar work tasks completed. I don't want to get into the morality of how that spill and fill process has been used, but I think that the best thing you can do is to create a really open line of communication with your manager, with your own manager, about what are the renewed KPIs and expectations upon you and your team. Is it fair that you should continue to deliver the same results and outcomes with less staff? I don't think so, and I think that there should be scope for you to have some form of discussion, and if not negotiation, as to what your renewed KPIs are. So I hope that that answers your question. The next question we've got from another anonymous is, what is the best first line to use in a cold call reach out? Wow, what a great question. Depends upon your personality. Find out what your personality type is and play to your strengths. You might be an extrovert, and so you might need to just rein in what that first line is. You might be an introvert, and you may not actually deliver a first line, which is sufficient. I would just say, again, don't be afraid to talk about the fact that your previous position was made redundant and that you've got awesome and outstanding skills. My first line would be to use my elevator pitch. And I would define one sentence which best describes you, the results that you've delivered in the past, and what you will achieve for an employer moving forward. So that's my advice to you. Thank you for that question. Jason, with 40% of today's jobs expected to no longer exist in 5 years' time, what do you think are likely to be the new industries of the future? Do you know what, Jason? I have actually not brought my crystal ball with me today. I'm sorry, I forgot to bring that. Mate, I think that what is very clear is that the nature of work contracts in Australia has changed enormously in the last 10 years and probably will continue to change over the next 5. Governments are putting a lot of effort into science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And so there's a lot of talk about there being a real opening up of positions and new jobs in those industries. The industries that are likely to fall away are the ones where we're concerned about automation. And so, you know, I think it's probably worthwhile having a look at which of those industries may be at risk and determining if you're in you need to undertake any further study in order to gain access to some of the new industries. But back to this issue of contracts, what we're seeing is long-term contracts or even permanent roles seem to be disappearing in Australia, and instead they're being replaced by short-term contracts. And I actually think the graduates of today will probably end up with 20 to 25 contracts that they'll have, contracts of employment, during the course of their career. This was a new normal before COVID, and I think will continue to be a trend moving forward. So thank you for that question. Dan Allen Courant, are there any alternatives which could replace the JobKeeper payment scheme during or after the COVID pandemic? Well, without sort of delving into any of the arguments for or against, one thing that we do know is that the JobKeeper payment scheme always had an end date associated with it. And the reason for that is that the current federal government made a decision that there was only so much money available to be able to continue to support people who whose employers may not have been able to cover their wages fully. I guess what we're seeing is the federal government drawing a line in the sand, pointing to the vaccines being rolled out in Australia and saying it's time for us to stop that payment. I'm sorry, I don't know if there are going to be any other payment schemes available other than, of course, the Job Seeker scheme, which continues. And so there are unemployment benefits available to people who are eligible in Australia. But I certainly haven't heard of any form of replacement subsidy other than certain industries in the last few days being successful in having some support for their employees moving forward. And I believe that the airline industry is one of those industries. We've had one more question pop in. Are there any other skills you see that children in the future will need when they are young adults in job search? I love this question. I'm sure there are a number of us who are online who have kids, and we all want to see our children have a future, of course. So being a young adult involved in job search, regardless of the industry or the profession that one is hoping to find work in, I feel the very best thing that people can do is to have some form of work experience available to them. And it may be that if you can find full-time work in any form which is able to pay the bills, and you're finalising your studies, or you've finished studies and as a young person you're looking to gain access to your profession, maybe it's a stepwise approach that should best be taken. And so having any form of work is better than having none. Being employed, oddly, can make you more employable, because if you were to apply for work and you've actually got an existing role on your CV, for some reason there's a psychological benefit there and an employer will be impressed. So they're more likely to consider you if you've proven that you're eminently employable. And so for young people, I often say, well, undertake an internship or find work, even if it's not in your chosen profession, and just get on the ladder. Let's get started with that job application process. So the last question of the day, thank you, Claire. I have real concerns about underemployment. E.g., as a recent graduate, most work is casual and insecure. Any tips on how to handle the anxiety this brings, as well as how to have a conversation with an employer about more stable work? Claire, probably one of the most common questions that's being asked in Australia is that one. And this is where I feel it is important to accept that anxiety and some of the emotions associated with feeling insecure in your current work situation are real. They can be addressed, and they're best addressed if you do have a conversation. By all means, talk to your employer about more stable work. But I suppose to help you to deal with the anxiety, just consider a lot of the support mechanisms that are available across Australia, and don't forget your friends and your family. So, mental health concerns are very, very real at the moment across the Australian marketplace, and please just be aware that there is support available to you. All right, so with that, I really, really thank you all for hanging in there and being part of today's webinar, and I'll hand back over now to Griffith to finish off. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you, Gordon. Some really interesting insights there, and I hope that people are feeling a bit more confident in their employment futures. I particularly like the fact that you went discussing both the emotional impact and acknowledging that that's a very real aspect in the world we're facing at the moment, as well as the more practical elements that will help people face an uncertain future, I hope with more renewed positivity. For people who have found themselves looking for work in the current environment when they might not have done so for many years, I suspect this is a particularly challenging time, and so those tips around transitioning careers through volunteering and further training, gaining skills and experience, etc., to upskill and add to the resume, I think would be really useful. I really hope everybody got as many great takeaways from Gordon's presentation as I did. We will send you an email in the following weeks with a link to the recording of this webinar. And the email will also ask you to complete a short feedback survey, and we would appreciate you taking the time to complete that survey so that we can continue to improve what we offer to you and your alumni community. If you want to know more about what we do in alumni engagement at Griffith, or the ways in which you can continue to be involved with your university, please get in touch anytime. We are on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. Just search for Griffith University Alumni, and I hope that your association with us will continue for many years to come. I would like to sincerely thank Gordon again for being with us today, and to you all for joining us online from wherever you are. It was great to have you all here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.